From Pagosa Springs, Colorado, this is Pagosa Springs Fox News, your satirical news source, with today's anchor, Brighton Early. Good evening, I am Brighton Early, and today we have for you a new feature segment called The Loose Cannon. In Archuleta County, the Executive Director of the Pagosa Springs Community Development Corp., referred to by locals as the CDC, has become a lightning rod for several public comments he has made on some controversial issues, including Big Box and the village at Wolf Creek. For more on this deal, we are joined in the studio by Gerald Rivas.
Thank you, Brighton. Archuleta County doesn't lack for controversy. This guy is really a loose cannon. In addition to the two divisive issues you mentioned, according to a local paper, he stated that the governor promised to attend the Nashville Songwriters Symposium to help kick off the event. Later, he acknowledged that an invitation had not been extended to the governor as of yet. The CDC Executive Director also made commitments in providing a venue for the Nashville Songwriters Symposium before a deal was even approved on the property he was committing. He has stepped on some toes of some local businesses by his choice not to use local talent for the CDC website. He chose instead to use an out-of-state company who he already had a relationship with. So who is this guy really? If you talk to his supporters, he is a hero who will stimulate the local economy. If you talk to his critics, he is a snake oil salesman. The CDC board feels he is brilliant and brings fresh new ideas. Some factions of the public says he had his head up, well, you can imagine where. Despite having put his foot in his mouth several times, and several supporters admitting that he sometimes opens his mouth a little too much, and they wish on those occasions he would just zip it, they strongly feel he is the right person for this job. This guy seems to be made of Teflon, and has the attitude that he knows everything, therefore does not listen to other ideas or engage local talent. This attitude has alienated individuals in the community, including one music industry professional who brings a lot of tourism and money to this community. One of his statements that you mentioned, Brighton, about the village of Wolf Creek being a priority for economic development in Archuleta County, well, it's interesting since it resides in Mineral County. Thus, none of the tax revenues from the village would go to the coffers of the most impacted communities, those of Archuleta County and Rio Grande counties. With hotels and restaurants at the resort, who will want to drive 45 minutes to town, especially in inclement weather, to eat or shop? Just to give you some perspective on this development, it is located at the South Fork of the Rio Grande headwaters and could easily affect this major river system and the agriculture that depends on it. According to local sources, numerous issues, including increased traffic, access to the village, water consumption and supply, and wastewater were not adequately addressed by the developer. Also being ignored is the medical situation. This parcel is at 10,000 plus feet, higher than any other U.S. overnight resort. At 10,000 feet, our lungs absorb a third of the oxygen as it does at sea level. This alone creates a raft for potential medical, marketing, even ethical, perhaps liability questions, since medical experts advise against lowlanders spending nights at extreme altitude. The CDC director's attitude that he knows everything is evident by the formation of a committee to investigate possible economic impacts of the project on the area. Then he went public with his support of the project before any conclusion or recommendation was put forth. Local and visitors alike attach a special sense of place to Wolf Creek ski area, not just for the beautiful natural setting, but for its affordability, its rustic appearance, lack of development, deep snow, and undiscovered glades, and because it is a direct contrast from the crowds, cost, clutter, and mechanical efficiencies of major ski resorts like Breckenridge, Aspen, and Telluride. And the vast majority of people I talked to didn't want that to change. They are afraid that if the village were to happen, it would eventually go the way of two other resorts owned by investors from Texas, one in southeastern Colorado and one in New Mexico, that went out of business, thus having a negative impact on the community. Not all the problems and confrontations the executive director is encountering is his fault. The board of directors for the CDC should have given him better guidance and information. You know, they sent this guy into a minefield with no idea of what red flags were there that could blow up in his face, and many have. This past Monday, the CDC director submitted a letter of resignation to the CDC board, a resignation the board ultimately rejected. The room was packed, mostly with CDC executive director supporters armed with scripted speeches and words of praise. There were a few people there who spoke in favor of accepting the resignation. One we spoke to said he was tired of the exclusion of ideas by experienced great minds in the community, further stating that having a discussion with this man usually ends up in something of the fashion of the CDC director saying, "If I agreed with you, we would both be wrong." We spoke to one of the locals, and they said the CDC director is a nice guy, has a lot of energy, is a great salesman, and works really hard. These are common character traits, but the CDC position requires extraordinary abilities. One individual asked the board about a Central Mississippi February 10th posting where the town's mayor stated the CDC executive director would be returning to Central as the economic development consultant. Interesting enough, the CDC contract allows for him to perform outside consulting work in conjunction with his economic development company. Makes one wonder how much focus he can place on this small community if he spreads himself too thin. It is apparent that this county is run by the golden rule, which we all know is, whoever has the gold rules. Back to you, Brighton.
Thank you for that very insightful report. We are now joined by our political analyst, Joy Kill, who is going to give us an update on last week's segment, The Royal Screw.
Thank you, Brighton. As I mentioned in our last segment, honesty, timely open communication, and transparency is going to be key to these commissioners winning back the trust of the community. A week has gone by and still none of this has occurred. There have been no BOCC minutes posted to the county website, despite requests from several people. In addition, none of the commissioners have reached out to the public to repair the damage caused by their lack of transparency and communication. The county should take a page from the town. They have a very robust website where minutes are posted. There's a wealth of information available. They have agendas, minutes, who's who in the various committees. In fact, you can even sign up for e-notices for all this information and more. Brighton, we will keep an eye on this issue and see if anything ever comes from promises made by this BOCC group.
That is pretty sad that there has been no effort as of yet for the BOCC to make strides to engage the public. Sad situation there in Archuleta County. Until next time, this is Bright and Early saying goodbye and thank you to all our listeners. We will see you soon.